Those people thought it would be fine if the government came to take their children away. In my family, take me away from my family, they thought it would be fine if my parents got fired from their jobs, right? They thought those things were okay. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me.
Welcome to the Coffeeshop AU. I'm your host, Jay. I'm trans, non-binary, neurodivergent, and currently living in Seoul, Korea. I believe that queer folks like me deserve more safe spaces to tell our stories our own way. To help me do that, my friend Sheri is joining us today to share with us her story. Hi, Sheri.
Hi, how's it going, Jay?
Pretty good. I have my oat milk latte in front of me, so all is well. What about you? What are you drinking?
I also have I think if I were to get it in a coffee shop, they would call it a flat white coffee. But basically it's, just regular coffee with milk.
Okay. I thought flat white had like foamed milk in it or something. Something fancy.
It's probably something like steamed milk to make it nicer, but
That's what I mean.
yeah, I think so. Mine is, it comes from home, so it's plain.
Your home coffees are pretty good though.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Where are you joining us from today?
I, too, am in Seoul. Actually, let me go ahead and introduce myself. Is that all right?
Good,
All
yeah.
right. As Jay said, I am Sheri. I am an American living in Seoul. My pronouns are she, her. Just for context, since you all can't see me, I am white and I am middle-aged.
Is there a reason that you are using that descriptor, middle-aged?
Oh, I suddenly realized I'm middle-aged. And what caused me to realize I am middle-aged is that I am entering perimenopause.
Oh.
I know. The thing that is most surprising by that is sudden hot flashes. So, for example, the other day I was on the subway. It was very cold outside, and all of these people are on this subway car in their giant puffer jackets and their hats on, and I have taken all of my outerwear off, and I would have taken off my very light sweater vest. I just didn't have the space, but I'm sweating. I'm pretty sure people thought that I was ill, except for other women also going through perimenopause right now. And I'm sure they all looked at me and went, oh, I feel you.
Yeah, people who have already gone through it. They're like, I know what's happening.
Yeah, all those people, they knew what was happening.
I actually do remember you mentioning it the last time we met. We had tacos.
Yeah.
And you were saying that you make this joke. Your partner says to you, oh, honey, you're so hot. And you just go,
It's the perimenopause.
yeah.
It's
thanks.
the hot flashes.
It's the perimenopause.
Yes.
So, right, you are middle-aged. And what is that like? Aside from the hot flashes and all the lovely stuff, does that make you feel a certain way?
No, actually, I feel fine. To be honest with you, I don't really mind aging. I minded not feeling well. But that didn't really have anything to do with my age. It had a lot more to do with fibromyalgia and migraine. And so,
Right.
I have chronic migraine. And so having literally a really killer headache every day really takes it out of you. But I'm on another medication now that mostly stops the migraines. And that has just changed my whole perspective on life. I feel so much better. So to be honest, the aging part just doesn't bother me that much. I like getting a little bit older. It's okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like I know more. I have more experience. I have gotten to the point in my life now where I'm just like, whatever, it's all good. So I like that.
Well, great. I have that to look forward to.
That message of hope, young people, it gets better.
It gets so much better.
It really
it's
does.
true. I do love being in my 30s. I'm in my 30s. I'm still figuring my stuff out, but I do feel much better than when I was in my 20s, I will say.
Absolutely. Whenever I hear young people say things like, oh, I wish I could go back to this particular time and it's anywhere in their 20s, I'm like, no way. That is like a terrible decade. The 30s really is great. You feel young and energetic. Your body's still really strong and doesn't typically hurt all the time. And people take you seriously. You're old enough, wise enough that people are
That's
like,
true. That's a
yeah.
big difference. Yeah, I feel like people are starting to take me more seriously just because I look older. I might still not know what the hell I'm doing, but they are just willing to take me on my word. Yeah.
Right? Magical.
Aging's great. I can't wait until I'm like 70 and people just bow down
I
whenever I
know.
walk by.
I feel that same way too. I'm like, every decade, I'm like, yes, I'm getting up there.
Just for those listening who maybe don't know what fibromyalgia is, could you quickly explain what that is and how it's improved recently, right?
Yeah, it really has improved a lot for me. So, fibromyalgia is actually a very complicated syndrome to try to describe because it has so many manifestations. For me, it mostly shows up in muscle and joint pain. And so throughout my body, my muscles will turn very, very hard in spots. And it will almost feel like I have cramps, like muscle cramping. I have joint issues that will suddenly hurt. As I put a foot on the ground, my foot will give out, usually because of this incredible sudden pain. What's the other one I have a lot of? Well, fatigue is very common. Like, not just, I feel tired today, but I don't know if I can continue eating this meal because I am just so exhausted. I can't possibly chew another bite. And I have a lot of nerve pain. So I get this burning, shooting pain, especially in my arms. And that's not my favorite. That one probably keeps me up more. If I'm sleeping, suddenly I'll feel like my arms are on fire. And that makes it a little tough to sleep. Yeah, so it really shows itself in a lot of different ways. But that's my extra special, unique way. But I feel a lot better now, mostly because I am moving again. I am exercising quite a lot. And one thing with fibromyalgia is you start feeling so badly. You get all of this pain, and it is very challenging to convince your brain that you need to move through it. And so rather than doing that, you sit still, you lay down, you start not moving. And the more you do that, the weaker you get. And the weaker your muscles get, the more the symptoms increase. So I wish if somebody had told me in the very beginning, when I first got diagnosed, which was quite a bit later, it took decades to get a diagnosis. I wish somebody had told me the most important thing to do is not stop moving. And I think that would have made my little journey a little bit better. But I figured out in the end, and now I am moving and exercising, so works better.
Yeah, it's been like really cool to see you. Like, first of all, I didn't know it could get that bad. It's not necessarily something you talk about with your friends on a day-to-day basis. And then I saw that you started to work out and you changed pretty dramatically, I feel like, on many different levels.
Yeah, I feel like it too.
Yeah, appearance-wise, and also just like we've all been sort of struck by the fact that your body hurts less and, all of that. And so I was like pretty inspired just because, like you said, you're middle-aged. And what does that even mean? If you put the work in, change your body, things improve.
Things improve. It's so shocking. Who knew that effort would end up with a positive result?
So you actually never finished telling us where you are. You're in Seoul.
Yeah, I am in Seoul. Do I need anything more specific than that?
Basically, I just like to ask my guests to paint a picture for whoever's listening where you are physically in my home. There's a cat.
There is a
somewhere
cat
nearby.
who will not stop crying, and I think the only way to make her stop crying is to let her in. So I'm sorry. I was trying to avoid this, but here we go. Welcome, Kitty.
Yay!
Yay. All
Kacey,
right.
Kacey.
Oh, yeah, here she is. So, where am I now? All right, so I am in Seoul in my apartment. I'm in my office. Although when I say office, I mean the room that holds my computer because it also holds clothes and, other stuff. It's not the world's biggest apartment, so my rooms are multi-purpose.
I know exactly what it looks like. I and many, many friends in our community, in our little social group, we've all slept over at your place multiple times. The office that you're in now is where the blankets are stored.
I was just going to explain that. I was like, ooh, the blankets are in here too. Yes.
Sometimes the pillows too.
Sometimes the pillows.
And that's where also the cats go in and out of the cat food, the toilet as well.
Yeah, there's a litter box in here as well. Like I said, a multi-purpose room. Although Kacey, the cat here, is not in here to eat. She's just in here because I am on a Zoom call and she believes it is her one job to be with me on Zoom calls. I appreciate the support, Kacey.
Yeah. What was it you said about her? Her true vocation is to have an OnlyFans page?
Yes, that's exactly right. And she believes that her best time to practice is when I'm on a Zoom call. So she's like, hey, everybody, look at my butthole. So I'm sorry, you'll probably get an eyeful today.
That's okay.
Okay.
Like, it's a nice butthole.
You know, really, it is. If I had to rate all my pets' buttholes, she's definitely number one up on the list. So I appreciate that.
And points for attitude as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You have to have a certain level of confidence, and she's got it.
So we could literally spend this entire interview just talking about your animals.
Yes.
But let's save that for another episode.
Okay, yeah. We'll circle around for another episode later.
Yeah. So now you are in Korea and what is it that you do?
You're like, why are you here?
Why are you here?
Why are you here?
You American?
Yeah, American. I know. Right now, I'm currently a professor. I've actually been a professor in Korea for quite a long time now. When I first came to Korea, I didn't actually plan on staying very long. So I just got kind of a standard run-of-the-mill teaching English job. And then when I decided that I should stay, then I decided I should also move up in job into something that I would be happier doing.
Right.
And I really do enjoy teaching young adults. I like adults, and I especially like young adults, so I decided that the university level would be better for me.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that for a very long time now here in Korea. I think I moved into the university system in 2007.
That's a while ago.
It is a while ago. I have had a full career just in Korea, not even talking about what I did prior to Korea.
Don't worry, we'll get to that.
We will get there.
This is all about you.
Yes, this is my joy, all about me. Anyways, not only do I teach, which of course most foreigners, if they teach English. And of course I do teach English, but I also teach leadership and sexuality. So that's also the courses that I work on now.
What an interesting combination.
I know, isn't it? That's also the joy of teaching at university. Depending on your school, you can develop courses that fit more in your area of study rather than just here, teach this textbook about English, which gets a little bit boring. It's much better to teach about the things that you care about.
Yeah, I remember when you were first coming up with the sexuality course, you spent quite a long time coming up with the curriculum. And it was just kind of really interesting to see you design the entire course from like start to finish. And again, it is an interesting combination. Leadership, sexuality, but there's a whole thing behind that too.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get into that too.
Yay.
Yeah, you're just a gift package of curiosities.
There we go. I've got a little bit of everything in there. We also have my wife and I, we also have a sex toy store.
Because you're a lesbian.
Because I am a lesbian. Oh, I forgot that part of my identity.
We forgot to say that.
Oh, man.
Yeah, you're gay.
I forgot it because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it anymore.
Yeah.
I kind of did. Once upon a time, when I was younger, it was, it was more in the front of my brain. And now it's just kind of shifted to the back. I just don't think about it quite as much.
I have a wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, score!
married.
I'm done now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally teasing. That's terrible.
I won.
Lesbian, check. All right. So, but we have
Yes.
this a sex toy store that we run in Seoul. To be fair, I haven't been doing that so much recently. That mostly falls on my wife. Thank goodness for her. I've been busy working on some of my university projects, and the store has been moving around. But my
Yeah.
wife mostly carries that. So, yeah, that's mostly what I'm doing these days.
When I sent you the question sheet for this interview, I like to do what I call boundary check to see what you're comfortable talking about, what you're not comfortable talking about. Are there any things that I didn't think of that you would like to discuss? And in our pre-interview, you said, I don't have problems answering any of these questions except the one where you asked me, do you remember our first meeting? I actually can't recall. So
Yeah.
why was that, Sheri?
Honestly, yeah, you're right. Do you remember our first meeting? And I was like, no, Jay, haven't you just always been in my life? Like, I just could not remember a time when you just weren't there. So I really actually had to rack my brain.
It does feel like that.
So I was like, Jay has always been there. So when could this possibly not have been true? Let me roll back in time. And I did get to the first meeting. I did get there, finally. So our first meeting was actually at the opening party for our shop.
The sex toy store.
Yeah, the sex toy store. So again, I'm not exactly sure how you ended up at this party. That's another story you'll have to tell us. But you were there in this audience. And that particular evening, we were doing a lot of things, but the first time I remember you, I was standing up on a stair so that I could kind of see into the crowd. You were on the opposite side of me. So there was like a display in the middle. You're about as far away from me as you could get in that store. And I was asking, trivia questions related to sex and sex toys and such. And you answered one of the questions. Actually, I even think I know which one it is now. And you answered the question and you got like our big prize of the evening.
Yeah. It was like the most expensive thing you could have won.
Yes.
And it totally changed my life.
Yay! It was like the most expensive thing in our store, I think, at the time.
We had a Swarovski crystal button.
Yeah.
I remember.
You're
like, this is luxurious. Okay.
Fancy.
My first introduction to a proper sex toy. Great.
See, there you go.
Do you remember anything else?
Well, like I said, I think I remember the question.
Which one do you think it was?
I think it was, what does BDSM stand for?
Oh.
Wasn't that it?
Okay. I think it was, what are the 3 ways you can prevent a UTI during sexual intercourse?
3 ways I think you can prevent an STI, I think. I think it was a sexually transmitted infection.
The only reason that I am fairly certain it was about UTI instead of STI is because the thing we all had in common was that we sleep with people with vulvas and we also have vulvas. And I think that's why like it really stuck with me. But
like I'm
you could be right.
familiar with the parts.
The BDSM question was probably in there somewhere.
I'm sure. Honestly, I'm sure we asked all of these questions. There was a wide range.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of questions. Yeah, and there are a lot of people.
A lot of people, yeah, it was.
But and you're addressing the crowd.
Yeah.
When I was writing that question, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if Sheri doesn't remember because you're really looking at a room full of people.
Yes.
But I was just looking at you.
Oh.
Yeah. You're really commanding the audience.
It's the teacher in me. I know how to command eyes.
Your natural element.
And I can project my voice. It's a skill.
You look like you were having fun.
It was fun. Tons of fun. I do remember you now, but I was kind of a face in the crowd, as you're correct. What I'm not exactly sure is how you ended up then coming back into our lives and just being a presence. But I have a feeling that might have had to do more with Haeyoung, if I had to guess.
Yeah, your wife.
you know, I would come back from work at the university and I'd come into the shop sometimes and there would just be random people hanging out in there that I had never met that she's like having a party with. And so, you know, she collected a lot of really great people. Yeah. That then I benefited
I was one
from.
of them. So. Yeah, no, that's completely accurate.
Okay.
So to answer your first question about how I ended up there on that day of the opening party of your sex toy store was maybe like a couple of weeks before that. I was going through a phase. I had just come back to Korea and I realized that I had no adult friendships that I had built, you know, since I left Korea when I was pretty young. So I was like, I want friends. I want more friends who can hang out with me and, you know, like talk about stuff. And I think I'm queer. So maybe, hopefully, if I go to the Itaewon/HBC area where the store was at the time.
Yeah.
That's like queer central. That's what I've been told.
I'm pretty sure I'll stumble upon the gays.
At least one, you know? So I started going out and hanging out there on the weekends, and I met some really nice people. So we started kind of meeting up on the weekends. It was summertime, so it was just the perfect weather to drink and smoke and just while the night away. And it was on one of those weekends, I was at a bar with one of my new friends, and, you know, he struck up a conversation with somebody who was with Haeyoung, your wife. So they were talking, and then I was introduced to their group, and I don't remember what we talked about, but she said that we talked about fan fiction, which tracks, you know, about like Korean boy bands from the early 2000s. And I just remember that she was just so kind and just had the most beautiful energy ever.
She really does.
She told me that she was married to a woman. And I was like, oh, okay. And then she said, and also we're opening a sex toy store soon. It's right across the street from here. If you ever want to come and hang out, please do. We're having an opening party on this day. We would love for you to come by. Just come by. And I was like, okay, I'm a very literal person. Even more so back then. So I didn't think she was just being social. I was like, oh, she gave me an invitation. I'm gonna go. So when I showed up that day, that evening, I was so hungover. I had been on an all-night morning binge with some of my new friends. But I was determined to win. You know, I was like, if I can get this toy...
You're like, I'm gonna get it.
You know, that'll be the highlight of
that will
this
have
new
made
chapter
all
of my
this
life.
pain worth it.
So that's how I ended up there that night. And then the reason I kept going back was, I don't know if you remember this, but after that opening party ended, during the party, actually, I started chatting to quite a lot of people, you know, who was already like friends with you. Some of them became part of the group after that day. And I was like, this is such a great group of people. This is great. So I stayed after the party ended. And we had tteokbokki and sundae, and I think you might have been there.
Was that
on the floor?
On the floor, yeah.
On the floor of the store, which sounds pretty unhygienic, but it was fine. We had like some things like laid out underneath the food, and nobody minded. It was just such like a warm, familial, communal atmosphere, and I just felt very instantly accepted for whatever reason.
You were.
Yeah. And then Haeyoung said, come back whenever you want. You can just come to hang out. And I was like, oh, another invitation. In my head, I'm like, well, she's extended this invitation. I must take her up on it. So, and also I really liked all of you. So, yeah, that's how I ended up going back. I think I bought some things at the beginning and then I just started hanging out. And that's how it became part of the fold. Always, like you said, there were always just people hanging out at the store. And that's how I made a lot of my friends that I have now.
Oh, that's so cool. Our sex toy store, bringing people together.
Yes.
Yay.
In so many ways. Honestly think, you know, I learned so much by being a part of that community that the sex toy store was at the center of. It was really the heart. It was literally a safe space for people in the community to just go to, drop by, say hi, and catch up. Oh yeah, you let me work there for quite a while.
Yeah.
So
Let you. I love that. We wanted you to work there.
and I got to see you like grow the business and how you ran the business, how you treated people, and I feel like I learned so much from that. But that's again for another episode because there's just too much that I could talk about from that whole experience.
Yeah, we could talk about a lot.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. But literally, mission accomplished. I wanted new friends, preferably people who are in the queer community who also spoke English and Korean the way I do. And that's exactly what I got.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very happy. And since then, we've been friends for so long.
Yeah.
I was thinking back on this and I was like, is that right? Like, have we been friends for like 7 years now?
Yeah, it must be 6-7 years.
That's closer to a decade. In my brain, it's like 4 5 years. I think it's because of the pandemic. It just kind of erased time.
Yeah, that did.
But anyway. So that's how we met.
Oh, what a lovely story.
What a lovely story.
Honestly, it is so hard to meet friends as an adult who is no longer in school.
True.
Like, you suddenly categorize your friends. Like, do you have any friends? Well, yeah, I have this work friend. Do you see them outside of work? No, they're work friends. And so it's actually very challenging to come into a new environment, like for you, having come back to Korea, and then to find friends, like people that you can really connect with that are the types of people that you really want to be around.
Yeah.
That's so hard as an adult. That is one of the things that has shocked me a little bit as I am getting older, is that it does become more challenging to find the people that you really, really want to allow into your life.
That's very, very accurate.
I struggle a little bit because as a foreigner in Korea, I have Korean friends, of course, and I have foreign friends. And my foreign friends go home, right? A lot of times they leave.
Big time.
Yeah, right? So sometimes I'm like, I love this person. They're maybe my best friend, been my best friend for 8 years. And then they're like, I'm sorry, I'm going to go home. What? I'm happy for you, but I'm so sad for me. That kind of thing. So
yeah,
it sometimes can be a challenge. That's the issue. People leave.
Yeah, people leave. I guess, in the grand scheme of things, we all leave.
We all leave. Yeah.
One way or another, we all leave.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I was going to say something, and I think it was kind of an important point. Hopefully it'll come back to me. This is another great thing about aging.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes things come back, sometimes don't, and you just learn to let go.
Ooh, that's actually a fibromyalgia thing too. They actually have a word for it. It's called fibrofog.
Really?
Yeah, that was I guess physically, the pain is a problem, but more to a point about who I was as a person. I was most concerned about the fibrofog because I lost the ability to think. In the middle of a sentence, I would lose my words. And I just have to stop speaking because those words were gone. They would come back later, but in that moment, I couldn't even form words to get out of my mouth. It was awful. Yeah. Well, I had forgotten about that one. And that made me go, oh my God, do I have dementia? Am I having early onset Alzheimer's? What has happened to me? And will I lose my job because I'm suddenly not smart enough to do it? That kind of thing. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
It's better now.
Fun brain.
Fun.
I remembered what I was going to say.
Good job. What is
Thank you. I was going to say, on the point of just meeting those people that you really like, that term chosen family, I feel like you all are a form of that chosen family for me.
Oh, yeah.
We've actually been to funerals together, like multiple funerals. You came to my grandmother's funeral, and then we went to another funeral together. If we go to a wedding together now, it's the full package. We're now permanently linked.
I know.
And
yeah, I would like to. We should really try to get into a wedding together, I think, because it's nice to also include the celebratory.
Just get in there.
We just need to get in there.
Just sneak in.
Sneak in. We can be gate crashers. Nobody will notice.
Sounds fun.
Right?
Queer gate crashers. Yeah. But I do feel like this is sort of a family.
Me too.
So yes, I do feel that when you meet those people, you cherish them. Like I cherish this connection. Even if we don't see each other very often, I feel like it's a very core part of my social connection.
Oh, yeah, me too. But you don't have to see somebody all the time to know that they're still there for you, right? And that you're there for them. And that, in my opinion, time and distance don't really matter, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Especially because I have so many friends abroad that I've met here or vice versa. So it's kind of like the older you get, the more you understand that time and space is just kind of really very relative.
It really
it's a
is.
factor.
Yeah.
But when you have a connection, it's like, yeah, you deal.
Yes.
So you are a university professor in Korea, and you also co-own and run a sex toy store in Seoul with your wife. Before that, before you came to Korea and decided to do all of this, who were you? Where were you? What did you do?
I did a little bit of everything. When I tell people where I'm from, I almost always say Colorado, even though that's technically not true. I was born in Indiana. I stayed there until I was 10. And then I moved to Colorado. I claim Colorado because I did all my higher level education there. So I went, middle school, high school, university was in Colorado. And my mother is there. So when I think home, I generally speaking think where my mother is.
Right.
And since that's Colorado, that's what I say.
Yeah.
But of course, I've lived in multiple other places. So I also lived in Massachusetts. I lived in South Carolina, back to Colorado. All this before I came to Korea, but after I graduated high school. And job-wise, I've done a lot of things from teaching. I taught sixth grade math for a while, which I'm just going to tell you right now, I strongly don't recommend that career. To be honest, I'm not really big on recommending education as a career at all. Really, don't go into this career. Like, you have to really, really want to be an educator. Otherwise, do something else.
Valid.
For sure. I mean, I like it. And I occasionally go, wow, what was I thinking? So anyways, yeah.
You are pretty passionate about your job.
I'm really passionate about my work. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I have a PhD in lifelong education. I really care about education. But again.
There are just those days. ...
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're a doctor.
I
Dr.
am.
Slick. This is your actual real name.
Yeah, it really is. It sounds, though, like, is there such thing as a supervillain? It sounds like a supervillain name. Dr. Slick.
That's exactly what I think. Dr. Sheri Slick.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, SS for short.
Yeah. You're like, I know. My mother, she told me once that she didn't like her married name that much because her first name is Shirley.
Okay.
And so she says, when you say it together, Shirley Slick, it sounds like Betty Boop, this old cartoon character. And she goes, yeah, I don't like the connection that it sounds so similar to Betty Boop. And I said, thanks a lot, Mom, for the name Sheri Slick. A little similar to Betty Boop, but,
Yeah, that's the train of thought that led her to name you Sheri Slick.
I know. Thanks, Mom.
Parents.
I know. Oh, what else did I do? One of my favorite and most helpful jobs was being a handyman's assistant. I did that for 3 years when I was in high school. From 15 to 18, I worked every weekend during the school year and all the time on vacations with this man who I still stay in contact with. I love him. Oh, he's great, yeah. And I met him at a gay and lesbian youth group in my city. It was an extremely small group, a handful of people, because in the entire city, there were only a handful of young people that knew that they were gay and were able to get to a meeting like this, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
This is in the 80s, 70s?
It's in the very early 90s. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Very early 90s. Yeah, when I was growing up.
Yeah. And so, again, as I mentioned, I'm from Colorado, and I'm specifically from Colorado Springs, which even to this day is one of the most conservative areas in the country. There are a lot of religious organizations headquartered in Colorado Springs, including Focus on the Family, a really enormous Christian organization. And in the late 1980s, they were coming into Colorado, and there's also a lot of military bases. And honestly, when you get a lot of military people, you also tend to make the location a little bit more conservative. And people like Colorado Springs. And so people would come back when they retired from the military, they would come back to Colorado Springs. So we have a very strong military personnel with conservative Christian. Those communities are very strong in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
That sounds lovely.
Oh, God, it was so... It was awful. Like, sometimes even now, I'm thinking back to how much fear I had in my life. And it's very interesting because I want to say my home life was very secure, but it also wasn't. Rather than having the threat from being inside my home, the threat was external to my home, facing towards my family.
Homophobia.
Homophobia, yeah. The reason, I guess I should mention why a small child would be afraid of homophobia, because most children do not know that they are
Queer.
Queer, yeah. It was the fact that my mother was also a lesbian. My mother was married initially to my father. And when she realized that she was queer, they got a divorce. And that is actually a big part of why we moved to Colorado. So for me, it was an issue of all the time. Oh, wow. And my mother was a teacher. And a lot of people don't know this, but even today, there can be what's called a morality clause in your contract as a public school teacher. And if they find meaning the bosses, the Board of Education, for example, if they find out that you have done something that they disagree with, they will fire you under the morality clause. And at that time, particularly during that time, homosexuality was against the morality clause. So if anybody found out that my mother was gay, she certainly would have been fired. And then, of course, for me, it's well, then what do we do? And there was just so many things going on, right? It wasn't just you can be fired. There was a lot of homophobia in the community at that time because people were, as it is suddenly again, there was a lot of homosexuals are grooming children. They're all going to grow up to be queer. They're trying to do these terrible things to children. And so there was just all of this anti-queer hate everywhere. There were billboards put up. There were giant full-page ads in the newspaper about how awful queer people were. There was violence, a lot of violence, physical violence against queer people. And so I realized at the time, and now looking back, how terrified I was all the time.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I never had friends come over to the house, or I'd have like one friend. I had one friend that used to come over, because she would never say anything, right, to other people.
About your mom?
About my mom, yeah. And so, of course, my mother wasn't telling people, like, she would never look at my friend and be like, oh, by the way, I'm a lesbian. No, never. But even somebody coming into the house and saying, oh, that's interesting. 2 women live here. 2 adult women live in this house. That alone would have been enough to get her fired.
Yeah, because your mom had a romantic partner at that time.
Yeah, who, interestingly, was also a teacher. And so we knew, like, if this information comes out, there will be no career for anybody in this house, no income. We are at risk of violence from our neighbors, strangers. It was a very scary time. People were getting injured on the streets. And there was a political move at that time to pass an amendment to the state constitution that legalized discrimination against gay people. And it passed. It passed. And see, that's the other thing. That was also scary. It wasn't just the fact that somebody proposed this amendment to the Constitution. It's the fact that the majority of Coloradans thought, yes, we should be allowed to discriminate against gay people whenever we want.
That's terrifying.
It was.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
That case actually ended up having a stay, right? They went through the courts and they stopped it. And by the time it got through to the Supreme Court, it was declared unconstitutional. But that was a long period of time, and to be honest, those groups are still trying, right? Still trying to get those things. We see it now all over the country, especially as people are writing these anti-trans laws.
Yeah.
A lot of their tactics started in Colorado. That was like their test group back in the late 80s, the very early 90s, to see what kind of commercials motivated people, what kind of rhetoric would encourage people to think the way that they thought. And so that was the era where I grew up. My most formative years.
Yeah, like all the way up to like how long did you live there?
Oh, on and off from when I was 10 to about 26, 27 before I came to Korea. When I came to Korea, it was from Colorado. But even now, there are still people are like, oh, Colorado, it's so liberal. You know, they vote blue and all that. No. To be fair, Denver is, Boulder is. There are certain parts of the state that are very liberal. And because they have a large population center, Colorado votes blue. But I wasn't from those places. I'm from Colorado Springs. And so even now, Colorado Springs is super red. And so it's only because of where people live, how many liberal people live in our big population centers. That's why Colorado votes a particular way. If it wasn't so densely populated in those areas, it would certainly be a red state, and a very, very, very red state.
Yes, you were telling me that you regularly go back and visit your mom, family, with your wife. And you were saying that even last year you saw a billboard?
Yeah, there was a billboard up with all these anti-gay slogans on it. Yeah.
Like what? What did it say? This is going to be very triggering, so content warning.
To be honest, I can't tell you. I remember looking at it and being so shocked to see it. But then I promptly put the specifics out of my mind.
Right.
See, even for me, that's one of those things that I'm like, wow, that's hateful, but I don't need to dwell on it. I am shocked that it exists. I'm shocked that it exists in this place at this time, but I'm also not going to keep thinking about it. That doesn't do me any good. And so for me, if I was going to spend time thinking about something, I'm going to think about all the ways that I can fix things. I don't want to dwell on all the negative things that exist because I would never be able to come up for air.
Yeah, totally. So when you were still living in Colorado, you're a teenager, and you told me that you had this experience that made you realize that, I'm gay.
Yeah.
And then that led to all this other stuff until now.
Yeah. Thank goodness for that one little, like, you push the domino and they all just go. Thank goodness that led me to here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the crazy thing, and that is just because you are in a very queer-friendly family, which I was, right? My mom is a lesbian, right? Just because you're in a queer-friendly family doesn't make it any easier necessarily. It's not harder, but it doesn't necessarily make it easy to accept who you are as a person. So
yes,
honestly, when I was young, I didn't really think about my sexuality. For me, it's like it kind of always existed, right? Who I am. Like when I was a very little child, first grade, 6 years old, running around on the playground at school, I would run around and kiss this other little girl, my neighbor. She didn't really mind, so it was fine. We were all good. I was 6.
Yeah.
But I didn't really ever think that maybe the other little girls were not doing that. They were not. Just the secret is they weren't doing that. And so for me, it was that's just always the way I was. But then as I grew up, again, I wasn't really thinking about sexuality. Even when I was in, started puberty, I still just wasn't really thinking about sex-related things at all. So I never even considered my own sexuality, right? Whether I was gay or straight, didn't think about it until one day I did, right? And that one day came about when I was 14. So for me, I was in my first year of high school. And I had actually flown back to visit my father. He didn't live in Colorado. And so I was there, and I had gone on a trip to the mall, as all American teenagers do.
Mm-hmm. Very American.
Yeah, very American, right? So while I was there, I saw this girl there who was so cute. And I ended up kissing this girl. And then...
Okay.
You're like, how do you
Wait,
fall
you just,
into
like,
somebody's
went
lips?
up and kissed her?
No, we were chatting. And we were chatting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you kiss inside the mall?
Inside a store in the mall. Yes.
Oh. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. I'm very curious about the details. Like, was she working there?
She was working there.
Was she just...
Yes.
Okay. And you just chatted her up and then you kissed?
Yes. Which
you
I'm
had
like...
Great game.
No, to be honest, it would be better to say she kissed me and then taught me that I have game. This is how you play.
Okay, so interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Very surprising. And I then kind of ran away, right? I was a little bit surprised. I was not mad. It was not bad. But then, your brain catches up.
It was not bad.
Was not bad. No.
So
it was
not a bad kiss.
No, not at all.
It was just surprising.
Not even surprising. It's more like suddenly the weight of that action hits you, right? It's not that it was bad. It was more the issue of, oh, that was nice. That was very nice. I really enjoyed that. Oh, no. What does this mean? And so, I left, and then I got home and I was thinking about this, and I was like, I really like that. And now I'm thinking about this person like nonstop. And I was suddenly terrified because it meant that I was a lesbian, right? It meant that I was a homosexual. And I did not have bad feelings about homosexuals, right? That's the funny thing. My mother is a lesbian. I have a gay uncle, right? All of those things were fine. But then when I applied it to myself, I could barely breathe, right? It was so shocking, and probably shocking again, only to me. I am guessing. My mother told me.
I've seen pictures of you,
right?
As a child, teenager, and yeah, even your wife nowadays likes to say, "How did she not know that she was gay?" Yeah, not that, gender expression comes in all forms, shapes, sizes. And just because you present one way does not mean that your orientation automatically is going to present a certain way. However, it makes so much sense now,
Yes. You're like, there might be a
Looking
little
back.
bit of correlation.
A little bit of a correlation.
A little bit. Yeah, like even my mom has told me, oh, I looked at you when you were running around and you're 2 years old, and I thought to myself, her father's not going to be happy about this one day. Which my dad is fine. He's always fine. But, that was in the 70s. And so she was like, yeah, he's probably not going to be happy. But anyway, so like my mom pegged me when I was 2. She was like, she knew. Oh, that kid's going to be
Is that when you were
gay.
running around and kissing girls? No, that's
I
when
was
you're 6.
5 or 6 then.
But she just knew when you were 2.
Yeah, I was a very rough and tumble little kid and didn't act like any of my little cousins, that kind of thing. So she was like, one of these kids is not like the others. Yeah. But yeah, I remember like that night, I just could not breathe. I was panicking, right? It was, oh no, this thing that is so hard in our life already, keeping secrets. Nobody can come to my house because my mom's a lesbian.
And she's living with her partner.
In this terrible, terrible conservative place. And other kids at school are always saying terrible things about gay people. So in my mind, I'm like, oh no, I'm now going to fall into this category of most hated people. And I was not very thrilled about that. But to be honest, I got over it pretty quickly because, again, I'm not one of those people that really likes to dwell on all the negative things. So by the next day, I was like, all right, you just have to acknowledge the fact that this is the way it is. and you're just going to do the best you can going forward. So I didn't sleep that whole night, but by the next morning, I was like, this is just the way it is. I had never thought about it before, but this is my life. I'm going to accept it, and then I'm going to move forward. And that worked.
Oh, that's great.
It did work pretty well. Yeah. Yeah.
It does sound on brand for you. You're like, oh, I was a little bit disturbed or annoyed or sad for a minute, and
Terrified.
then I decided that I wasn't going to.
Yeah, I was actually terrified.
I'm talking about other things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think that is actually a common thread in whenever, my queer friends and I talk about our first dawning of understanding of our own queerness, especially, I think, pertaining to parts that are visible externally, like if you're attracted to like people of the same gender, or like me, if you're trans and you feel like you need to medically transition, something that other people can see about you, your orientation, your identity. I think a lot of the times the first thing we feel, no matter like where you grew up or what your family is like or when you grew up, I think fear is a very common thing that just comes up.
Yeah.
But especially for you, growing up in that environment at that time, even with your family condition, I can't, it sounds horrible, but then you're like, you know what? This is how it is. Let me figure this out. Just before we move on to the next part, can I just ask... And if you're comfortable describing it, of course. But the kiss, I just need to know how that happened. Just as like a gray sexual, gray romantic person, I don't know how people just like meet and then that's what happens. What happened in between your walking into the mall and then kissing this girl and then running away?
Boy, when you put it like that.
So romantic.
So romantic. The funny thing is, I don't remember much about it. See, I've blocked out all of like my bad, terrible things, the really bad things I blocked out. But it turns out some of the things that were also kind of stressful, I just don't remember very well either. And that moment was very stressful. So I don't have a lot of details. I remember it was a shoe store. Which also, I love shoes, no surprise. Lesbians want athletic shoes, don't they? Ha 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 ha, just kidding. So it was this shoe store, but they had clothes and stuff also, because I remember the racks of clothing. And then this other young woman in there, right? That's one of the workers. And what's funny is I don't remember talking to her, but I know we did. We were talking. Don't have any idea what we were talking about. I assume it must have been shoes and clothing, but who knows? And I feel like she asked me if I was gay.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it's better to do that before you
that's true.
Kiss some random person. Which means, and the funny thing is, I don't remember what I said.
Oh, okay.
Although I assume the answer must have been yes, because if I had said no, she probably wouldn't have kissed me, right? And so then she pulled me off to a side. So it was kind of behind a rack of clothing. And my guess is now that was a place that was off camera, that she probably thought it was not on the security cameras. And we kissed. It was a nice kiss. And then I ended up leaving. I got to go.
You're just like... Oh, I gotta go. Like right after?
Pretty quick. Yeah, actually, pretty quickly after. And then I saw her once more because I was at my father's house.
Visiting.
Yeah, I was only visiting. And I was too young to drive. So it's not even like I could drive myself over to see her. So I saw her once more, just briefly, and then never saw her again. Oh, yes.
Do you think you would if you ever met this woman again, right? And you recognized her, she recognized you, how do you think that interaction would go?
I'd probably laugh. By the way, thanks for that. It was great. Kind of an evening of torment in my mind after that, but it really cleared things up for me. Right? It really did clear things up.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you started on a nice road to queerdom. It worked out. Thanks for that.
I mean, we all need these people,
Yeah,
right?
you need somebody to give you a little kick in the pants every now and again. That was it. Yeah.
All right, so you came to terms with that.
I did,
What
yeah.
happened next?
Then eventually, I went back home and I started my high school career. And one thing I did notice, though, once I realized that I was, queer, it became even more noticeable how much homophobia surrounded me, my life.
Right.
And so school was a little bit challenging. So I went to a school with, I don't know, maybe 1,200 students, and I didn't know any other gay students for quite a long time. So my whole first year, I didn't know any. And then in my second year, my neighbor came down to visit me to my house, who I'd known since like grade 6. And she says, hey, somebody asked if you're a lesbian. And
what a weird thing to ask.
I know.
What a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? Did you bring me any cookies?
Yeah. Hey. Yeah, this person asked me if you're a lesbian. And I said, why? Why did somebody ask you that? And
That's a valid question.
Right? I'm like, that's so out of the blue.
That's the only appropriate thing to say in that situation.
Yeah. And she's, oh, this person, I think, is interested in you.
Ooh.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. And I said, then the next important question, well, what did you say? Now, of course, nobody knew, right? So I hadn't told anybody. And so she goes, I told her, no, you aren't. Isn't that the right answer? And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I didn't really say if it was the right answer or not, right? I just said, oh, okay. But then I was like, I'm going to find this person. I am going to find this person. And I did. And it turns out that this girl, this young woman, was a senior in school. So in her final year of school. And I was a sophomore at the time, so 15. Since she was in her last year of school, she would have either been 17 or 18, right? Kind of depends on when your birthday falls. And she was in the same grade as my older brother. So I kind of knew a lot of those kids just because of same grade as my brother. Although the funny thing was, after I had gotten to know this girl a little bit, we were walking to one of my classes once, and she says to me, I think your last name is so interesting. And I said, oh, yeah? Yeah. She goes, but what's weird is I've never heard the last name Slick before, but then I meet you and we have 2 Slicks in this school and they're not related. Like, how do you have people with a name that unusual and they're not related? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, yeah, we have a B Slick in my grade. And I'm like, we are related. That's my brother. And she goes, what? They started going to school together in 7th grade. He has been telling us he's been an only child the entire time I've known him.
Wow. What even is that?
Yeah. Obviously, we did not have a strong familial connection. We're not chosen family. So, yeah, he would pretend that he didn't even know me in school. So when I was being kind of tortured by the other students, like sometimes they'd be pushing me around or spitting on me, things like this in school. And my brother would just look on. He would not.
Crap.
Yeah, he wouldn't try to protect me, wouldn't try to do anything. He'd just be like, oh, that weird kid is getting picked on. Oh, well. So, yeah. And so I was like, what? I remember that. So she was the one that told me my brother has been claiming he's an only child his whole career.
That's pretty delulu.
Yeah, right?
Why were you bullied? Not that there's any good reason for being bullied.
I know, but I mean, I was bullied because I look the way I look, right? Especially at the time. I mean, I did not look like a standard issue girl, shall we say. I looked pretty butch. And so the other students spent a lot of time bullying me because of that. And of course they would use homophobic slurs and things like that towards me. That was a little bit that was very challenging for me, both the physical threat and the emotional drain really, of getting all of these comments all the time. And as I told you, for example, in my second year of high school, when I was meeting this girl, that was also the same year that that amendment to the Constitution passed, where voters in Colorado decided to change the state constitution that would allow discrimination towards gay people.
In what way, can I ask?
Sure, in every way. So basically, it put into the state constitution that it was okay to fire people for being gay. It was okay to kick people out of their homes for being gay. It was okay to take their children away from them because they are gay. But more importantly, right, that stuff still happens. You can still do that. Even now in many places in the States. But what it really wrote into the Constitution was you're not allowed to seek redress through the court system.
What?
Yeah, that was the terrifying part. So, for example, if I get fired for being gay, I could file a lawsuit against my employer. Now, I may win, I may not win, right? Depends on the laws. But the way the amendment changed the Constitution in Colorado to say that you were not allowed to even file the complaint. It just basically was open season, right? That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was open season for the LGBTQ community, because there was, even if something wrong happened to you, you couldn't complain. There was no way to do that. Ultimately, that amendment was overturned. It was declared unconstitutional at the federal level, so it couldn't be enforced in Colorado. But, that doesn't take the problem away. The problem is that such a huge percentage of the population thought that that was okay to do. Yeah. And so just because a court says, yeah, that's not okay, doesn't immediately change people's beliefs. So during that time, for me, I appreciate my mother. She allowed me to participate in the politics at the time. I went to a lot of campaign events. I was out there. My mom took me out of school on voting day. She didn't force me to. She asked me if I wanted to. Yeah. And I said, well, yeah, of course. And I stood outside a polling place handing out flyers. Vote no on two. Vote no on two. Vote no on two. Right? We did a lot of campaigning, which was, for me, a very good learning experience. But also, you realize some of these ideas that people have, your neighbors, right? Your neighbors. You understand the ideas that they have. So maybe, in our house, here's my house with my gay moms. And then the next door, both sides have signs in their front yard that say vote yes on Amendment 2, which means those people thought it would be fine if the government came to take their children away. In my family, take me away from my family, they thought it would be fine if my parents got fired from their jobs, right? They thought those things were okay. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me. And after the amendment passed, it, of course, got much, much worse, right? So all of those students at my school whose parents were also very actively campaigning on the other side, they would literally, they came to me like the next day. They didn't even know that I was queer. They're like, the homosexuals are going to hell. And look, everybody agrees. Homosexuals are awful, kind of stuff. And for me, it was... Wow. Yeah, it was very challenging. Politically, it was a very challenging time.
And also, you're a kid.
I was a kid. Yeah, I was just a kid.
Yeah.
But, at that same time, I was meeting this other queer student at school.
Who was interested in you, potentially.
She was. Yes, she was.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. And so that was a very joyful time for me. Although it was also my very first heartbreak, right? After a while, we kind of drifted apart. But, one of the things she did was she introduced me to a gay and lesbian youth group in the city. She took me there, and there was just a handful of kids. I would say like on a good day, there were like 8 kids there and from all over the city, So that's not a very strong percentage, really. Yeah. But it was a place to go and meet other queer kids and see that you're not the only person. And that was also a joy, right? And the funny thing is, shortly after that, she and I kind of drifted apart, and she didn't really ever come back to the youth group. But of course, she was older than I was, and she had a whole different friend set and was going off to college and all of these kind of things. So it doesn't surprise me that we drifted apart. But I was actually, and I'm still super thankful to her for kind of delivering me into the hands of these other queer kids. She introduced me to people I really needed to know at that time. So I'm thankful to her all the time. I should send her a message someday that says that. We don't talk, but...
Do you have her contact?
I think I do, yeah. Somewhere, I think I have it.
Yeah, some people really do come into our lives to like deliver us to places that we need to be at.
Yeah, that's actually how I view her very much. And so I made some really great friends in that youth group. And I met Ken. Ken owned his own handyman company. He was a handyman. And he was in the youth group and he asked, he was like, hey, do any of you boys want to come work for me? Do you need a job? I know it's hard for gay kids sometimes to find a job. And if you work for me, you can, of course, be gay because I'm also gay and I don't mind. And you know, you can learn some skills, you know, how to take care of your lives and all this, but it's pretty hard work. And not a single boy said, yes, I would like to do that.
Really?
Yeah. But at the end of this particular meeting where he had mentioned it, I came up to him and I said, I'd really like to have a job. I need a job and I think that this sounds exciting and fun. And he goes, I've never actually had a girl work for me. It's really, really hard work. And I said, I'm a really hard worker.
Which you are.
Yeah. I am. He's right. And he goes, okay, come work with me this weekend and we'll see how it goes. And I said, okay. And I went to work with him. And that particular weekend, he was working on a pastor's house.
Oh, wow.
The pastor of the MCC church in Colorado Springs. So it's a metropolitan community church and it is a queer church. So I remember we were building a fence, like a 6-foot tall privacy fence made from wood. And so we were digging all of these post holes and then you'd set the posts in them and pour concrete. So he had told me to go pick up all this concrete into a wheelbarrow and bring it down to him. So it's in these big, heavy, like 80 pounds a bag of concrete. And I loaded a bunch of them. I'm trying to bring it down. And as I make a turn, it's too heavy and the wheelbarrow falls over. And the bags of concrete spill out onto the ground, but they're so heavy that when they hit the ground, they broke open.
Yeah, for people who are not Americans, 40 pounds is like, did you say 40 pounds?
Each bag was 80 pounds. So that
80
must,
pounds.
it's close
That's about
to
like
40 kilograms.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah, and there was, I don't know, how many kilos? Okay, now I have to do the conversions. There must have been 4 or 5 of those bags in the wheelbarrow. So it was pretty heavy for me.
That's like 200 kilos, yeah.
Yeah, it was like 200 kilos. I was moving bodies in that thing. Like, it was heavy. And when they hit the ground, you know, and the bags break open and I'm looking at all of this concrete powder and in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is how I'm going to get fired on like my first day.
We've all been there.
Right? We've all been there. He comes walking up and he looks at the concrete on the ground and he looks at me and I'm like staring at him with these big giant eyes like, oh no. And he goes, must have been a little too heavy, huh? I said, yes. And he just grabbed a shovel and he goes, go grab that shovel. And we just scraped the powder and put it back into the wheelbarrow, you know, and he picked up the wheelbarrow and pushed it the rest of the way. But in my mind, I'm like, yep, that's it. I'm done. And at the end of the weekend, he goes, so yeah, you know, you're really not as strong as all the boys I'm used to working with, but you're real fast and you try really hard. So I think it's going to work out. I'll just have to remember you're not as strong as some of those other guys. And I'm like, awesome. And I ended up working with him for the next 3 years. I still talk to him. He's still lovely. And I'm super thankful to him because he's a gay man in the queer community. Yeah. And so he would take me out to lunch. He'd buy my lunch when we were working and he'd take me to some queer restaurant that I didn't know about, and I'd meet all these people. So with my mom, I was meeting all of these political activists, right? That's kind of my mom's side. And with Ken's side, I'm meeting all of these older gay men. Some of them, were like these drag queens at night and all of these things. So I'm meeting all of these really interesting people in the community. Not to mention, this was the very early 90s. And a lot of these men were really struggling with the AIDS epidemic. And the community that he introduced me to during that time was just constantly in mourning, right? Because so many of these men had died from AIDS. There was no real effective treatment at that point. And so just man after man after man, right? These gay men were dying. And so it also gave me a very different perspective from what I was getting in other places. And it gave me an ability to talk about some of those real community sadnesses, right? This kind of community trauma that I might not otherwise have been able to develop. That skill of speaking of these traumatic events and considering with empathy what another person is going through. So I'm thankful to him on so many levels, really.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm just taking it all in.
It was a different time.
I remember you telling me these things because we've known each other for quite a long time and we've spent so many hours sitting on your couch with the dogs and the cats. And you will just tell us this stuff, in bits and pieces, but to hear it in a more linear way with the context of everything. Yeah, it's heavy stuff, and it also makes so much sense of the way you are and the way your partner is. And I feel your place in the community that we are in now. Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Hello, it's Jay from the future here, with a slightly lower voice from being on gender-affirming hormone therapy, just to let you know that though my conversation with Sheri is far from over, the second half of our talk will continue in the next episode, which will be uploaded next week. The more of these interviews I do, the longer they seem to get, which I think is a good thing since that means there are many more stories to come. And because I think our conversations are worth hearing in full, instead of editing out chunks of our talks to fit them into a single episode, I've decided to upload the longer talks in 2 parts, so that you don't have to miss out on any of the interesting details from the lives of our amazing guests. So thank you for listening, and in the meantime, feel free to check out our social media page on Instagram, where you can find photos and playlists as well as other visually interesting materials that round out our Coffeeshop AU's AU. You can find us at _coffeeshop_AU, and if you want to reach out with thoughts, stories, and or comments, you can DM us there or even email us. Our address is hi@thecoffeeshopau.com. We hope to hear from you. Take care, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!